The following is an overview of the installation procedures of the Haworth premise panel system. It will be broken up into chapters, so if the need arises to review certain segments, please feel free to go back. Any questions following the viewing of this, please consult your local Haworth tech rep. We're going to take a look at panel types in the premise line. This is what we refer to as a monolithic panel. It will ship this way with the fabric already in place, ready to install. And we also have, what we'll talk about here in a minute, is a super base panel. Both of them will allow stacking that goes up to a 10-foot ceiling. So a lot of features. As far as the top goes, we do have an inverted trough for cable management. If somebody decides to run cables here versus the bottom, that is their option. On each side of the fabric panels, we have a vertical drop that goes to the bottom to bring cables down from a top feed, communication cables down and things like that. Sides of the panel, it has a built-in panel lock. These two teeth here will actually lock into the connectors. We'll look at connectors next, and that's what's actually going to fasten the connector to the panel. This one happens to be a non-powered panel. There's no power at the bottom. It will have the black plastic legs here. What that's going to do is when we get to the section that the raceway covers go on, that's going to hold on the raceway covers. We have a 6 3/4 inch tall raceway cover, so a lot of room for power, a lot of room for communications, and that will keep it a little more stable and not be able to move around once we put the raceway covers on. So that's the monolithic panel. Super base panel is quite a bit thinner by design. Now when this gets dressed up with the tiles on each side, it will be the 3-inch wide panel, just like this one. So yes, you can put them side by side. Why would I use one over the other? This is a one-piece, less expensive way to get into the premise family to get your full height panels. This one allows a few different tiles to go on. This comes with fabric or comes in glass. This one can come with wood tiles, with steel tiles, with marker board tiles, a lot of different options. So if you're going for a different look aesthetically, this will get you there. And also communications technology can run between the panel and the skin itself. So you can do it with both types of panels. The technology is a little easier to run with this type, but both tend to work well together. In a typical installation, we'll see both types of panels. So we'll go ahead and look at connectors next. This chapter is going to focus on premise panel connectors. We'll go through a few features here before we start to build panels. This is a premise connector. Some features are it is shared. What does that mean? A panel will go both directions. It's nothing I'm going to put together and have to build in inline condition. So this will be a connector for a straight inline connection. Some features of it will have the slots in the holes, the 2 locks that were on the panel. That's what will go into these holes and lock it down to the connector. The bottom of the panel has a wing which the panel will lock into at the bottom. So it will be secured at the bottom, lock in the top, and then we'll show you how those connect next. As far as the glide adjustment goes, we publish 2 inches of glide adjustment, so this is quite a bit of adjustment for unlevel floors and things like that. As far as using it in different applications, this is a 2-way or 90-degree connection. It's the same connectors. It's 2 of the connectors with a corner lock put on at specific spots, and this would come built like this on a full-height connector. So if the need arises during reconfigurations and you need to take these off to use them as individual connectors, you will have that ability. It is the same connector. One thing we've done with this is let the system stack and change quite easily by the use of extended connectors. If you have something already this height and you have the need to raise something and make it taller and things like that, what you'll be able to do is just pop this into place and jump up 16 inches. Pop another one in, jump up another 16 inches, and that will give you the flexibility to hit some different height points with the same type of connectors. 16 is our most common. We start at 32 inches high on a super base panel, and we go up to 80 inches. Again, we can go above that and go floor to ceiling, but those are our standard connector heights. This will hit all the common heights, 32, 48, 64, 80, to do all those different applications. We also have, we don't use it a lot, but we also have a 10-inch connector that will go in the same way. Again, spring locks here, so there's no mechanical connections, no drilling, no nuts and bolts. It's locked in place. When I run and remove these things, it's a matter of squeezing in on these little locks and sliding it out. So this is a 10-inch. Why is that used? 32-inch base height panels. When we put a 10 on, brings us to 42. That's always been a good countertop or transaction height. So we do use the 10, but the 16 is much more common than the 10 is. One thing we've also added to the line a couple years ago is the ability to do 120s. Premise for years could do just 90-degree increments, 90s, 180s, 270s, and things like that. But what we did with this connector is made some small modifications to bring this to a 120-degree angle. It's a little different corner lock than you're used to. So this is not something that I'm going to take and rip apart and change and use in other applications. Why? The pieces on the bottom that house the bottom of the panel, when we put them in a 120 angle, they tended to hit in the back. They interfered with each other, so we did have to remove those. So this will ship like this, ready to go, to be used in this application only. It's not to be broken apart like the other connectors can in the field and be used in different applications. So that's what gives us our 120 application. Again, the same glide adjustment at the bottom. One side is missing the round foot. Why? Again, they just interfere or hit each other, so that's why it looks a little different than the typical connector at the bottom. Now that we looked at those, we'll take a look at how the panels actually go together. We're going to go ahead and put a couple of panels together. I'm going to take my connector, grab my first panel. Again, we're going to start at a two-way, which you do with virtually every panel system. I'm going to take my panel. The first thing I want to do is nest the bottom together. So I'm going to take that panel, nest it onto that metal bracket, and then what I'll do is swing the top one into place. And now I'm going to tighten this, and again, those two teeth will draw together in these holes to tighten itself down. I'm going to use a standard powered screwdriver. What you're going to use here for a bit is a 1/4 inch Allen wrench. That's going to do all the panels in this system. I use a ball socket, which is round on one side. Why? Because on some of the panels the connectors are taller, you tend to go at a little bit of an angle. If you don't have the ball socket, you're either going to damage your tool or damage the panel lock, and that's not a good thing either way. So again, if you're only as good as your equipment, get the right tool here and it will go a lot faster. What we're going to do is tighten that up. Now there is a visual on the inside so that I know it's fully locked. There's a lot of adjustments on the guns. There's 9 volt, there's up to 18 volt or whatever, all the different settings. You want to make sure you've got your gun set at the appropriate setting. You don't want to put these too hard and bust the lock as you're doing it. So again, you're not going to want to dial these all the way up, down a little bit, but you're going to want to know what's fully seated. And so make sure you refer to the instructions for that. Now that we've got that connector on, I'm going to do the second half of this, my other L-shaped panel here. I'm going to use a two-way connector to that. It does come pre-built on a full-head connector. I've got my 2 connectors. I've got my panel locks ready to go. What I'm going to do a little differently here is put an open base connector on. I'm going to have 1 panel of each here, open base and closed base. Those terms are, if it has a raceway cover, like most of the panels do, it's considered a closed base. Premise has a little lighter scale option where I can have an open base without a raceway cover, without power and everything at the bottom. This would be exposed, so what we'll do is put a little cosmetic cover over this. So we're going to use the same connector, but we will order it as an open base, and you will get an open base kit, which is an inside sleeve, an outside sleeve, and a plastic adapter to make it connect to the connector. The inside is always black. The outside is whatever trim color you order it. Basically, that's going to slide. Why? So when I adjust my 2-inch adjustment and my unlevel floor, this can go up and down and still have a nice clean look and not see the glide at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is take my little adapter here, snap that at the bottom. There are round holes on here which will match up with the dimples on my can cover. So what I'm going to do is take that, push that in place, make sure it locks on, and now I'll take my inside cover and put that on there. Now that is considered an open base connection. It does go on from the bottom and from the bottom only, so if you think you're going to put these on after the panels are up, that would be the dumb thing to do. You need it on right away. Keep in mind as you're carrying this too, this is dimensioned larger than the glide so that it covers it completely. So when I lift this up, this does have the ability to slide off. Again, can you put it on afterwards? No, you can't. So you're going to want to make sure you have those things. So we'll get this on the ground. We're going to take our panel connection. This will be similar to our other panel connection. We're going to start at the bottom, rest that panel down, bring the top in, and go ahead and take our Allen wrench and tighten it. So that's on. We'll grab my next panel, which is what we refer to as a super base panel. Again, this is the one we showed you earlier that's going to have the skins put on, space behind the skins or tiles that you can run communications up and down, electrical up and down. So this is going to be an open base panel. That's why it doesn't have the black feet and power and anything attached to the bottom. That's how I realize that this is an open base panel. So I'm going to take my connector. I've already modified this one and put the open base connector on. We'll start by putting this on the same way we did. We'll lock the bottom in place, bring this in and we'll tighten down the top. Make sure it's fully locked, and we'll take it and bring our 90-degree together and tighten down. So there's not too much to the panel connections depending on which type you're doing. So what we would do now, typically if this is a real installation, we'd level everything, make sure it's good, continue setting panels, and then we'll move on. Last thing we need to do here is add our crossbar. What is that going to do? That's our horizontal structure here to hold on the tiles. We've got a connector that goes taller, so automatically I know I'm going to have one. There's two types of crossbars. The standard crossbar, which you're going to use every day, and the structural crossbar, which has a welded plate on it so a hard surface pad can lean against that steel and not deflect. Why? Because you're going to have the weight of an overhead on there. This is designed to be used with off-modular overheads. So rather than the weight going into the connector slots, it may be shared in the middle of a panel, in the middle of a pad, and we need that structure. So you're going to use it behind off-modular overheads only. We'll install the same as a standard one. The standard one can go on from either side. It's going to go into the holes on the connector. That's why certain holes are larger, because they have to have room to fit not only these, but also pads that go in, components that go both ways. So certain ones are larger for different reasons. So we're going to go ahead and install this. Swing it into place. We'll seat it down. Now it's going to line up with the pre-drilled holes already in the connector for all the specific premise panel heights. So we've got this down. What we'll do is take the screws that come with it and tighten these in. The last thing we're going to do is it comes with a pad clips which stick out proud of the tube, so they didn't pack that well. So in the old days they were screwed on already or snapped on. We're going to go ahead and put those on in the field now. It's a lot less cartoning. So what the installer will do is snap these on. Anything greater than 36 inches wide will have 3. The smaller ones will have 2. So those will snap into those locations, and that ends the panel installation. Next, we're going to take a look at beltline power for premise enhanced. Now, again, this can also be done at standing height, but we're going to focus on beltline since it is more common. A little different than it was in the past. We are still using the premise PDA with the hooks and slots, which we always have. The cable trough and a few things have changed here. Why? To make power a lot easier. You're going to see in a minute here the tile has changed a little bit as far as how it looks, the bezels and communication. It's a little cleaner look. We've had some specification issues with the different powers that we've had out with the Moxie. So we're back to the simplistic power PDA and a flex connector. So life is getting a lot easier going forward with the premise product. What you're going to do when you have beltline power, you're going to open your parts and pieces. You do have a cable trough with slots in the bottom. We're going to lock this together, and it does go one way. I have a tab here at the end, which the PDA will put a screw through here to keep it from dislodging. So it's going to go in one direction. So you'll take your PDA, put the slots in, and draw it this way up tight to here. You're not going to want to bang it on the floor to seat that. Just kind of pull it snug. And then what we'll do is we'll take the little screw and put it in the end. And that will draw it tight so it's not going to be able to dislodge. Now what we're going to do is take the communication brackets. These have changed a little bit. And you're going to put these on so the communication faceplates will snap into this. There are pre-drilled holes, so you don't have to worry about where you're putting these. You're going to line this up with the pre-drilled holes. Take the small screw, go ahead and tighten these down, and we'll do these in all 4 locations. Okay, we've got our brackets on. What we're going to do is take our mounting screws, put it through the crossbar into the holes that you're used to, put it in here and hang the crossbar on that. I'm going to go ahead and get them started. What we're evaluating right now too is switching this from a Phillips head to a combination, possibly a hex head on there, so it may speed things up. Now that we've got those in, This goes on from one direction. We've got our return flange here and our crossbar, and of course crossbars can go on either way, but you have to watch this because it does have to come from the open side. It does have a keyhole slot in the side, so we're just going to nest it over that screw and then we'll tighten it up. So we'll take that, put it in place, make sure we seat it down all the way, and then what we'll do is go ahead and tighten these up. Okay, I think a hex head screw will make that a little easier too. We're going back to what we call the C connector. We used this long ago with premise. What this is going to do is take power from below and bring it up, or from up and bring it down, no matter where your power source is coming from. It will cover the receptacle spot. We're going to actually put it into the flex connector spot, but you can see it will cover the receptacle spot, so you will not be able to put one there. If you try and put it in the receptacle spot, you're going to find you got interference with some of these brackets. So we'll go in the end. If you want to do it on the other side, flip it over and pop it in here. Again, be a little careful, like with all electrical components. When you're putting things in, support the back side, depress things into place so we don't break any plastic. Be very careful with that. Make sure those are in, so now I've got my power connection through here. If I was running power continually, I would use a flex connector, and here's one of the nice features. This is the flex connector that we use on the base of premise. It's a little longer so that it can go behind the leg to absorb room. So this is the one you're used to with the blue label, and it's got the applications actually pictured on here. You are used to using something different here, a shorter one with a yellow sticker on here for straights. We're trying to simplify things, so we're going to use this one for everything. We're going to wrap it around the leg down here below for an inline condition. For a corner, we'll flex it. We're going to do the same thing here, but what we're going to do is wrap it around the connector. So this would go in from this side, around the back of the connector and forward and into the next panel to absorb that length. So it's going to be very similar to what we did with the base power, and it's going to be done with one receptacle. So this will allow you to use this flex connector on an inline at belt line, and also at 90 degree, where before we needed a different one. So again, a little more simplistic than we were in the past, and it's a little bit easier. So now that we've got that on, you can see how the power connects. Again, where you have the jumper, you will lose a receptacle spot. Where you don't have it, of course, you can put receptacles. At the bottom, you could come in with a floor feed, base feed, a typical base feed, and of course that always takes a receptacle spot, so that hasn't changed. When you will come in with the top feed, it's going to be tough to see this now, but what you have here, we went from an ovalized conduit, which ran between here and the pad. If you did it just right, you could make it work. It was a little awkward to make happen with a round conduit. We are eliminating ovalized conduit, and we're back to round conduit. So how do you fit round conduit between there? You don't. There's a hole in the crossbars on each side, or excuse me, in the cable trough, and also on one side of every crossbar that we're shipping now. So when I decide I want a top feed here, I'm going to take my round conduit, come up through the panel. No longer on the outside of the panel between the pad, there wasn't enough room. You're actually going to put it through this hollow core of the panel, come up here, feed it through here, come up, feed it through the hole in the crossbar, and come up into my top feed, and go ahead and make my connection at the top. As far as accessing power, we are going to go with a triplex. We've done some different things in the past, a triplex down below, a duplex up here. Some of it was a triplex upside down. Again, we are back to simplistic. I'm using a triplex down below, using a triplex up here, the same receptacle, the same location. And of course, you still have the nice features of programmability where you can slide the hot and neutral and accept either circuit number 1, circuit number 2, or circuit number 3 with the same receptacle. So that hasn't changed. So we can go ahead, pop those, make sure we're locked in place, and now we're good to go. Next, we'll take a look at some of the pads that cover this. This is the current utility pad that we're shipping now, a little bit different than before. We have the bezels on each side that are going to accept a triplex receptacle and the data piece. So it was a little different before, not a real ginormous change, but it kind of went from side to side versus one that's in the center. So what we're going to do is, I've already got a receptacle in place here, so I'm going to leave the blanks out for now. Installation is the same, and again, this will come on a fabric pad, you can get utilities, or on the metal slat type of pad, but that's the only one that will actually have the utilities housed in them. So what we're going to do is install it like any other pad. We'll get it connected at the top. We'll pop it into place. And then of course what we should do is take your certification card and make sure that those light blocks are tucked so the pad goes down clean. That's it for the utility tile. Okay, now that our panels are up, the electrical's done, we're going to go ahead and put on our trim. We're going to start with our vertical trim. This is a two-way cover to go on our two-way here. We've got the plastic aligners already in place. What those are for is when I go to put my top piece in, that will hold that and make that a rigid connection. I've got my little ear sticking out here, which will actually latch onto the corner blocks. So what we'll do, in the bottom, of course, is already pre-attached. You won't have to play around with that. So it's ready for install. We'll get it, we'll kind of line it up on the panel, get it centered, and then push down into place to seat that. We're going to go ahead and go to the other side where we have our end-to-run trim. Got my spring clips already in place, and again the bottom is attached. And what we'll do is we'll start that on the connector about 1 inch high and get it in position, and then seat that into place. Once all of our vertical trim on, we can go ahead and do our top caps, whether it's steel or the extruded aluminum, the groove top cap. We've got our steel top cap here. We'll take our end of run piece, slide that in one side. We will take our corner piece and slide that in this side, and basically that's going to help hold our two-way trim in here. We'll go ahead and install this by rolling this into place. Once we've got that on, we're happy with the alignment. The last thing we can do is come back and take our corner, align it with all 4 alignment pins, and seat into place. Let's take a look at some of the panel trim. Just as a refresher, this is today's steel top cap that rolls and snaps in place. This hasn't changed. To do your corner 2-way and 3-way and 4-way pieces, you're used to sliding these inserts in. On the opposite side, when it's an end or run, again, you're used to sliding these inserts in and popping things in place. Now we're up to a groove top cap. You do have the option of this. It's the same profile, but it is a heavy extruded aluminum top cap. It is a little heavier because we're going to mount some things off here. We've got 3 grooves. What are they for? The center groove is going to be for some privacy elements that we'll show here in a minute. The outside grooves are for up modular overheads and off modular T-mounts and some of those things. So it's not only for looks, but they are for functions. Notice the holes in here. These are to attach it. We will actually mechanically fasten this onto the panel frame versus a snap and fit, because we don't want this to come off that easy. Because the ends are solid, it's a different piece that goes in here. For the end of run, this is the groove top cap version. It's a little bit different profile. The end result is it looks the same, but it does go in it a little differently. And again, also your 2, 3, and 4-way piece, it's a little different so that it will be accepted in the groove top cap. So we'll push that in place. I'm going to go ahead and put this one on. And what we'll do is we'll center it on here. Now the holes are already here. I'm going to put screws through this hole, right through this bracket. So there's no modification or drilling or anything necessary on new product. We'll put this in place. And now I'm going to attach it with the screws. We do give a couple versions of screws. Whatever you order, we're going to give you screws to attach it to a monolithic panel. We're going to give you screws to attach it to a super base or a stack panel. We're going to give you all that hardware. Use what you need. Follow the instructions. We're going to give you silver and a black oxide screws. On the darker colors, we're going to dictate we like the darker ones better. On a light color like this, the silver looks better. Remember, this is generally done on lower panels because of the topper element, so they will be visible. So keep that in mind. Follow the matrix on the installation instructions and you should be fine. So what we're going to do is take a screw gun, and I am using a longer shaft on my screw gun. Please do that. The standard magnetic apexes with the bits in work for most things. They tend to nick the sides of these grooves, and again, they are visible. You don't want to damage this up. So take a longer Phillips and we'll snug all 3 of those in. And that attaches this. Now keep in mind here where I put this end of run in, that snapped in, the end of run had to be on first. So because I'm fastening this, it's a little sequential. I need my end of run on, then put this together. If I want to take this piece off, what I'm going to do is loosen up the screws, lift it up, and slide it out. So keep in mind it's done a little bit differently than the snap-on version, but for the same look. Now we'll look at some of the features and benefits of the groove top cap. Next, we're going to take a look at some of the privacy elements. We went ahead and we've got our groove top cap on. The reason we put it on is because we wanted some of the cool upper privacy elements. I've got one post on already. This is referred to as a topper. It is some visual privacy at the top versus a taller panel. We're going to get the poles roughly 14 inches high. I've got a plastic piece in the top. The bottom piece I'm going to go ahead and assemble. I've got a T-nut and a plastic spacer with some legs that will lock into the grooves of the top cap itself. So what we're going to do is get this started. The nice thing is there's no tools required. Not many things you can install today without that. So we've got this. What we're going to do is put it into that groove, and we're going to line those legs inside that groove. So as we tighten it, it will stay centered. We want to make sure that swivel T-nut cams over in there, so when I tighten it, just double check it doesn't pull straight out, because we're going to put something on here, and of course you don't want it to fall over. So once that's locked in place, again, if you need to move it, loosen it, slide it, retighten it. It's meant to be used off modular. You can use this anywhere. You can match panel lengths, you can share, so a lot of different applications you can do with these to give a little different look to short panels. Now that we've got the uprights on, we're going to take our horizontals. This one is a fabric version. What we're going to do is first is do that because it's fun, and then we're going to take this. If you look at the top, it's just a weighted rod, and it's got a notch in. What we're going to do is install that in the top. That's just going to lock over that lip. We're going to do it on both sides, and we also have a weighted rod in the bottom to keep it straight. Now the only thing you do from an install standpoint is center it. We want a 1/2 inch gap at each side. So we're going to nest that on, and then we're going to take the beauty caps and pop those in place, and that finishes the topper. Again, that's the last thing you're going to do after everything else is buttoned up. The last thing I want to cover here is the work surface cantilever. This is what you're going to see on job sites today. It's recognizable as a premise due to the elliptical hole. It is a shared cantilever. It did come factory bolted together as a shared cantilever. If you need the ability to remove the bolt and make it a handed one, you can do so in the field. What you're going to see shipped today is a similar performing unit, but packaged a little differently. It's a little more condensed, a lot less packaging. And what you're going to do is take the non-handed wing that's in the box and actually line it up with the tabs and pop that into place. So no more bolting. If you need to take it off, you can remove it. After that, it's ready for installation. Once that's in place, it's ready for a work surface. To see more detail on the premise panel hung components, please view the adaptable components presentation. If you have any other questions, contact your local Haworth tech rep, and we'd like you to know there were no animals harmed in the viewing of this video.